We've been looking at Proverbs to learn some ancient wisdom that we can apply to our modern lives. And what we find is that one of the greatest forms of wisdom is often to avoid wickedness. We just want to avoid wickedness in our lives, and we want to live in righteousness. We want to live in a way that pleases God so we can enjoy His blessings, not in a way that is self-destructive. Wicked behavior leads us down a self-destructive path. Now, I'm assuming this is true for all of us. I mean, we'd all like less trouble in our lives. Is that a fair assessment? I mean, I don't know about you. I'd like less trouble. I have more than enough. Thank you. What we find is that there's nothing that can get us into trouble so quickly and trap us so effectively as our mouth. Our mouth, our own mouth, gets us into lots of trouble. Maybe this naturally flows from what we looked at last week. We looked at the biblical concept of the sins of gluttony and drunkenness, which the mouth serves as an entry point for the things that get us into trouble. The mouth is kind of connected with that. Today, we're going to look at some areas where the mouth is the exit point for the sin that's within our hearts, the sin that uses our tongues to get us into a world of trouble. We're going to actually begin in something that James wrote before we turn to Proverbs. What he has to say, I think, sums up well what the book of Proverbs, the verses we'll look at, are telling us. This is in James chapter 3, and we'll pick up in verse 6. And the tongue is a fire. The tongue, a world of unrighteousness, is placed among our members. It stains the whole body, sets the course of life on fire, and is itself set on fire by hell. Every kind of animal, bird, reptile, and fish is tamed and has been tamed by humankind. But no one can tame the tongue. It is a restless evil full of deadly poison. Nothing can cause us trouble so quickly, so fast, get us into trouble so fast as our tongue. James tells us that the words coming out of our mouth can be like a deadly poison. And maybe you've experienced someone's venom when their tongue was lashing at you. In Proverbs, we read this. This is Proverbs chapter 18, verse 21. It says, "Death and life are in the power of the tongue, and those who love it will eat its fruit." Your tongue can be used for good, to give life. But we are warned that it also can be a source of great evil and bring death. It's the spark that burns down entire forests, a weapon that destroys people's lives. In the end, you will eat of the fruit of your own tongue, whether of life or of death. You'll get the reward brought to you by how you choose to use your tongue. The use of your mouth will bring life or death. Proverbs 21:23, we read, "The one who guards his mouth and tongue keeps himself out of trouble." If you want to stay out of trouble, if you want to avoid the traps of sin, the first thing you would do well to do is guard your mouth. Okay, guard your mouth. You must control your tongue. To fail to do so, to not only get your tongue under control, to fail to get it under control, is to allow an enormous wave of evil into your life. Now, sometimes we don't really see the tongue as being that serious. I mean, we know these problems exist, but we think, maybe it's a source of trouble. Maybe people think James or Proverbs is kind of overemphasizing this small character flaw. Okay, sometimes we look at it that way. What trouble can the tongue really cause? Are the sins of the mouth or the sins of the tongue really that bad? Well, here's a few sins that are committed. We'll look at this in detail in Proverbs, but here's a few sins that are committed by the tongue. Lying, gossip, slander, cursing, insulting, mocking, or ridiculing people, or even just being argumentative and quarrelsome. All of these are sins of the tongue. If we worked on it, now we might be able to think of some more. Not saying this is an exhaustive list, but at least, and we might think of other variances that fit within these categories, but the sins of the tongue are many. When we think about the sins of the mouth, lying is probably the first one that comes to mind. I mean, that's usually the big one that we think of. And of course, lying would be to directly say something that is false. It's the opposite of telling the truth. It's the opposite of who Jesus is. Jesus is the truth. Remember, Jesus said, I'm the truth, the way, and the life. He's the truth. God, who cannot lie. It's the opposite of his character. So when we lie, when we say something that is deliberately false, we are going directly the opposite direction of God's righteous nature. However, lying has a lot of subtle variances that people try to pass off as okay. Now, most people will tell you just bold-faced lying, that's bad. But they'll try and tone it down and have other ways they find acceptable. For example, they might have deceit, which would be saying things to deliberately mislead others. You say, isn't that the same thing? Well, maybe not exactly. See, sometimes you can say things that are technically true, but you can say them in such a way that it deliberately gives people a false impression. If your words are deliberately deceiving people so they will believe something that's not true, then that still comes under the heading of lying, deceit. This is what you deal with when you go talk to a used car salesman. Okay, deceit. Or, of course, another version would be exaggeration. Exaggeration, which is to overemphasize something, stretching the truth to lead people into believing something that is false. Another is slander or backbiting, which is talking badly about people in a false or misleading way that damages their reputation. You're talking behind their back, but you're spreading lies. You might want to consider this. Satan is the slanderer, the accuser. That's what he does. There's probably never a time you're acting more like the devil than when you're talking smack about someone. That's his job. Proverbs chapter 25, verse 23, we read this: the north wind produces rain, and a backbiting tongue, angry looks. As sure as the wind blows in a storm, if you talk bad about people behind their backs, it's going to stir up anger and trouble. It will. Regardless of the flavor of dishonesty in your heart, all these come out of the mouth with the intention of deceiving people, to cause them to act in accordance with your wishes, and they're used to twist people's understanding for that purpose. Okay, deceit and lying, they're used to twist people's understanding so they'll do what you want. Proverbs chapter 10, verse 18, we read this: the one who conceals hatred has lying lips, and whoever spreads slander is a fool. Proverbs 29:5, a person who flatters his neighbor spreads a net for his feet. Proverbs 26, beginning in verse 24, a hateful person disguises himself with his speech and harbors deceit within. When he speaks graciously, don't believe him, for there are 7 detestable things in his heart. Though his hatred is concealed by deception, his evil will be revealed in the assembly. Now, sometimes lies are bitter, but I'm going to tell you, sometimes they are dripping with honey. Okay, when someone's talking too nice to you, like that used car salesman, okay, or any salesman, you got to watch out if they're dripping with honey. The sound of a person's words, no matter how they appeal to you, don't determine their truth. Just because a person sounds nice doesn't mean they're playing honest. In fact, if it sounds too good to be true, there's a good chance it's false. Be aware of the liar, because they will use flattery to persuade you in their lies. Furthermore, if you are using nice words to cover up the hatred in your heart, or to cover up the evil intentions that you have, you're talking sweet, but you have bad intentions, that's lying. Your tongue is deceiving people so that they won't know the truth. Now, we're told that it's foolish to spread slander because it always comes back to bite you. That's the truth. It will. Lies are eventually found out and exposed. You won't get away with it forever. It'll come to the surface. Now, sometimes the talk we listen to, not just what we say, but what we want to hear and like to hear, reveals the sin in our hearts. This is Proverbs chapter 17, verse 4. A wicked person listens to malicious talk. A liar pays attention to a destructive tongue. There is a tendency for people to believe what they want to believe and listen to what they like to hear. A wicked person will be drawn to malicious talk. They'll enjoy it. A liar will enjoy a destructive tongue. You know, birds of a feather flock together. Okay? Liars like to be around other liars. This is a warning, firstly, to avoid those who love hearing evil things. Okay, if a person loves listening to bad stuff, warning, this person's got evil in their heart. They're desiring evil things. But it's also a warning to pay close attention to the speech we enjoy, because that will reveal what's in our hearts. If we're enjoying evil things, then what does that say about us? Lying sometimes comes in less obvious forms. Okay, there's the kinds that are pretty obvious to us, but there are less obvious forms. Proverbs chapter 25, verse 14, we read this: "The one who boasts about a gift that does not exist is like a cloud and wind without rain." Have you ever had people promise you things that they don't have, or things that they never have any intention of delivering? They're just making promises to get rid of you, to make peace. I think those of us in Phoenix can understand this illustration. Maybe we're living it today outside. Those people who, with empty promises, are like clouds without rain. You think the monsoon's going to come in and it's going to break the heat cycle for a day or two, but no, it's a lie. All we're getting is deceptive clouds that bring some extra humidity to go along with our heat. That's it. That's the description the Proverbs gives of the person who makes promises they're not going to keep. And maybe you've had this. Maybe you've had a boss who kept promising you a promotion. Keep doing your work, you'll get a promotion, you'll get a raise. Maybe. Maybe a salesman who promised you an extended warranty. Or a boyfriend or girlfriend who promised they will change if you give them another chance. All these promises, if not fulfilled, are lies. It's not wrong to make a promise if you're going to keep it. But if these promises are not fulfilled, they are lies. We must also make sure that our words don't trap us. Okay, your words can trap you. Sometimes in the heat of a moment, we might make a promise based on our intentions, maybe even good intentions, but then later on regret it. You ever made a promise to someone and wish you hadn't? Okay, Proverbs chapter 20, verse 25, "It is a trap for anyone to dedicate something rashly and later to reconsider his vows." Your words can become a trap. If you do not fulfill your promises or cannot fulfill what you have promised, then you become a liar. Don't make promises unless you are absolutely sure you're going to keep them. In fact, the safer thing is not to make promises at all. Now, this is true for the promises we make to people, but especially the promises we make to God, which may be the context of the verse. I don't know how many people have been in trouble and done this, but they start making promises to God to get them out of trouble. You ever see that? You know, God, if you will get me out of this trouble, I will do anything. I'll go to Africa and be a missionary. I'll serve faithfully at church. I'll even coach a little league. I'll do anything. But then once the trouble passes, they forget about all the promises they made. That's lying. Lying to God, that's dangerous. Better not to make the promise. All these things would come under the sin of lying, and all of them pass through our mouths by means of our tongues. And get in a lot of trouble. Well, but that's not all. That's not all. Another big sin of the mouth that we would remember and think about is gossip. Gossip, which of course is the casual or unconstrained conversation reporting about other people. It's talking about people, telling the details of their life that are none of your business. See, gossip is different from lying because it doesn't really matter if what you're saying is true or false. I mean, you can be lying and gossiping at the same time, although that might come under slander. But gossiping can be telling something that's 100% true, and it's still gossip. The issue of gossip is not your accuracy, but the wrong you are doing in talking about another person's life, revealing their secrets, revealing things that aren't your business. See, the gossip shares information that's not theirs to share, which might actually be more of a form of stealing. They're data pirates. That's what they are. They take your information and distribute it without your permission. It's a gossip. Proverbs chapter 11, verse 13, we read this. It says, a gossip goes around revealing a secret, but a trustworthy person keeps a confidence. Proverbs chapter 20, verse 19, the one who reveals secrets is a constant gossip. Avoid someone with a big mouth. That's pretty direct. The gossip is the opposite of a trustworthy person because they go around telling other people's secrets. Notice they aren't telling their secrets. They have every right to go tell their secrets. If they want to go tell the world what they've done, that's their choice. That's their right. They can tell about themselves anything they want. But that's not what the gossip does. Instead, they use other people's secrets, other people's information for their conversational enjoyment. You can't trust them because they can't keep their big mouth shut. They just have to tell the latest, juiciest information. And usually I find gossip is actually one of those sins that you do find in the church sometimes, not necessarily this church, but in general, it's one you find. Lying is kind of taboo, but gossip, usually they'll cover it up by acting concerned for the individual. We need to pray for Brother Bob because he has this problem. That's gossip. Or they'll tell you everyone because they need to know. For everyone's safety and well-being, I'm spreading the truth. That's gossip. See, most gossips will act very self-righteous in their gossiping. Proverbs chapter 26, beginning in verse 22, we read this. A gossip's words are like choice food that goes down to one's innermost being. Smooth lips with an evil heart are like glaze on an earthen vessel. The gossip will sound good. Their words will seem delicious. But if you let their words sink into your heart, it will poison you. Now, maybe some of you heard this week there was a little bit of a scandal in the news of, won't mention any names because I don't want to gossip, but it was a married man who got caught, a businessman got caught with their company's HR director. He was married to someone and she was married to someone, not to each other, and they weren't having a business dinner, okay? Most of the world has been poking fun at them and get them getting caught. And it seems like everyone just can't get enough of the scandal. It's everywhere. It's in the news. It's all over Facebook. The world just can't get enough of the juicy details of this piece of gossip. The desire to devour it like the tastiest food, gulping it deep down into their innermost being. See, if you can't get enough of the latest scandal, watch out. Watch out. There is gossip lurking in your heart. But gossips disguise themselves very well. Those smooth-talking lips are like a thick glaze on an earthen vessel. It looks smooth and shiny on the outside, but there's nothing but dirt on the inside. Also, we should be aware of this dynamic, particularly with gossip, is that it takes two to gossip. One to share the latest news and one to listen. Our duty is to refuse to play either part in that sin. Now, another sin of the mouth that we might consider, maybe a major sin of the mouth, would be cursing. And we in the Christian community, I think, often have used the word cursing to describe socially unacceptable language. Okay, I'm going to make a little distinction here, which is whatever words we currently find to be vulgar. Okay, that changes over time, what's considered acceptable or not acceptable. Some biblical argument can be raised for those concepts, but generally that might come under dealing with the sin that's in our heart. What our words reveal the sin that's in our heart. And so that might come under that concept. Why do you use filthy words? Well, because there's filth in your heart and in your mind. Okay, just that would be, what's there. But for the most part, in the biblical sense, cursing would be the use of the Lord's name in vain, or trying to call divine judgment down on someone. You are cursing God, or you're cursing another person or thing. You will hear people who will use God's name. They'll use the words of God or Jesus or Lord to express their disgust or their displeasure, or maybe even at times their excitement. Now, technically, all that would violate the third commandment, of the 10 Commandments. You've seen the movie? Okay. Of the third commandment, Exodus chapter 20, verse 7. Do not misuse the name of the Lord your God, because the Lord will not leave anyone unpunished who misuses his name. If you got something bad to say about someone or something, or if you want to express your extreme excitement or your extreme displeasure, you best leave God's name out of it. Just don't mention him. His name is holy. You should only use it when referring to him. Only use it appropriately. Only use it properly. Not for anything else. Don't use God's name lightly. And so that would be one concept of cursing. The other side of cursing is when people are damning something. They are cursing it. Sometimes they will include God's name with that. Other times they will not. But either way, what the person is doing is they are trying to call God's judgment down on something or someone, usually in anger. When people do this, really what they've done is they've decided God needs their verbal input to render his justice. And they're expressing their opinion about what God ought to be doing with their tongue. This is probably akin to blasphemy, because you're really usurping God's throne, taking his place, saying this should be judged, this should be damned or cursed. Proverbs chapter 26, verse 2 says this, like a flittering sparrow or a fluttering swallow, an undeserved curse goes nowhere. If you think that you're cursing something or someone is going to change God's righteous judgment, you're sadly mistaken. He didn't need our help to decide who to, he doesn't need our help. You should be glad about this, by the way, because that means the time someone's cursing you, it didn't change God's judgment either. That's good news. If the curse of damnation is undeserved, then it's not going to go anywhere. It'll flutter away like a bird. It won't stick. And if it is deserved, then it wasn't necessary, because God's going to apply his righteous judgment without our input. That's one thing. When you get to the great white throne, there's no jury, only a judge. He's going to give the verdict without asking opinion. Now, there's a lot in the Bible about the sins of the mouth or the tongue, but what do we do about it? Okay, now we've seen what's wrong, but what do we do about it? What is the cure or the solution to this problem? And there are some scriptures for us here, and so we're going to look at that. Proverbs chapter 15, verse 4, we read this. It says, the tongue that heals is a tree of life, but a devious tongue breaks the spirit. First, we need to recognize that our words are powerful. They're meaningful. Don't use them lightly. Now, growing up, I loved watching Garfield cartoons. Maybe it's where I got some of my sarcastic personality, but I loved watching Garfield. And there was kind of a reoccurring theme, Garfield the cat. Okay, he's that orange cat that likes Italian food, particularly lasagna. But a reoccurring theme is he would be on top of the fence singing and telling jokes. In fact, I think the show often, when he had his cartoon series, would open this way. And in one episode, they're booing him as they're throwing things at him. They're throwing shoes at him because he's up there singing and dancing and telling jokes. And in one episode, they boo him, and his response is, sticks and stones will break my bones, but words will never hurt me. And the next thing that happens is a dictionary flies across and hits him right in the face. Knocks him off the fence. Truth be told, whether in print or in written form, words can hurt. Words can cause great pain. They can break the spirit. We should not be deceived into thinking our words will never hurt anyone, or that their words cannot hurt us. But our words can also bring about great healing. Words have power to do both, to heal or to hurt. The power of life and death are in the words we speak. So we need to first off recognize that and be careful how we use our tongue. Be careful. It comes with a warning. Use cautiously. Proverbs chapter 24, verse 26, we read this. It says, "He who gives an honest answer gives a kiss on the lips." Just as lies can reveal hatred that are within a person's heart, the person who speaks the truth shows great love. And in their culture, kissing, was a good thing. It was a standard greeting. You met someone, you'd kiss them. Ours is more shaking hands, but that was part of their culture. Maybe we might apply it to ourselves this way. Your real friends and loved ones are the ones who will tell you the truth. The people who really love you are the ones who will tell you the truth. You should value people who will tell you the truth, because those are the ones you can trust. How can we protect ourselves from the sins of the mouth? What wisdom does Proverbs offer to keep us safe, both from sinning and from being harmed by the sinful talk of others? Well, let me give you 3 things this morning. 3 things which, if you follow these, can save you an enormous amount of trouble in your life. And when you hear these 3 things, you're probably going to say, well, that's common sense. That makes sense. Because it really is common sense, but sometimes common sense is not common. So God's word gives us these things. Proverbs chapter 22, verse 10 says this, "Drive out a mocker and conflict goes too. Then quarreling and dishonor will cease." Proverbs chapter 20, verse 19, back half of the verse, "Avoid someone with a big mouth." How do you deal with people who are committing the sins of the mouth? Avoid them. Don't go around them. Don't drive them out of your life, and don't listen to their words. Don't listen to the words of a liar. Don't listen to the words of a slanderer or a gossip. Protect your heart and your mind from being harmed by their evil words. If there's a big mouth causing you trouble, avoid them. Work to keep their influence out of your life, and you will have less trouble. The next thing Proverbs would tell us is how to keep our own sinful hearts from leading us into committing sins of the mouth. This is Proverbs chapter 30, picking up at verse 32. "If you have been foolish by exalting yourself, or if you have been scheming, put your hand over your mouth. For the churning of milk produces butter, and the twisting of the nose draws blood, and stirring up anger produces strife." Just as churning cream produces butter and wringing someone's nose produces blood, and stirring up anger causes trouble, so allowing your proud and foolish heart to put its schemes into practice through your tongue will cause you trouble. So what do? Put your hand over your mouth. Be quiet. How do you tell if a politician is lying? His lips are moving. Of course, that could be true of all of us. We can't be lying if our mouth is shut. I can't be gossiping if my mouth is shut. Put your hand over your mouth. See, if you're having trouble with your mouth getting you into trouble, if you're having difficulty with the sins of the mouth, stop talking. That's the biblical solution. It'll save you a lot of trouble. If your mouth isn't speaking, then you can't commit the sins of the tongue. A lie, a slander, gossip, all come to halt when you shut your mouth. And that may mean you have to forcibly put your hand over it. Some folks just have a hard time being quiet. But if that's what it takes to keep your mouth closed, do it. Now, this is if we have those evil intentions and we know it, and we know that our mouth is going to get us in trouble. But sometimes we are unaware of those intentions. With our own heart, we have good intentions, but our words still seem to get us in trouble. What should we do then? I mean, if we're not deliberately steering into trouble, but what do? Proverbs chapter 10, verse 19 says this, "When there are many words, sin is unavoidable, but the one who controls his lips is prudent." A biblical explanation on how to avoid sins of the mouth is talk less. Talk less. The more you say, the more potential you have for trouble. Keep it to a minimum. The less you say, the less likely those words are going to get you into trouble. Act like a teenager answering questions to his parents, okay? Just talk. Don't tell anything. Control your lips and choose your words wisely. That is how you can use the tongue to give life rather than have it releasing the poison of death. Now, these are the things we find in Proverbs that explain to us the warnings of the sins of the mouth and some ways to help that, to hopefully even cure it. But there is a problem with the sins of the mouth, and that is the mouth is not the source. It's the tool. The tongue is the weapon. But the source of the sins of the mouth comes from the heart. So to cure the problem of a mouth full of mischief, I'm going to suggest the cure is that we need Jesus. We need Jesus. Only He can give you a new heart. This is part of what we mean when we talk about being born again. That is when we invite Jesus into our hearts so that He can make the changes needed to overcome our sin problem. He comes into our life and He makes the changes in us. He cleans us up so we can do right when we couldn't before. Well, that includes the sins of the mouth because they come from the heart. If you haven't already done that, then putting your faith in Jesus, surrendering yourself to Him, putting yourself on His altar is how you get that new heart. We surrender to Him. We come to Jesus so that He can clean us up. We confess our sin so He can wash us clean and make us righteous. But in so doing, He begins that process of changing us, of changing our heart, of giving us that new birth. And so if you haven't already done that, I'd like to invite you to do so this morning. You'll find it's the only way to cure the heart problem. We can duct tape our mouth shut. Okay, that'll keep us quiet. Duct tape will silence stupid, but it won't fix it. Okay. Well, it's the same way with sin. We can keep quiet, but our heart still has the problem. The only cure is when we bring that to Jesus. Thank you for watching this video. If you live in the greater Phoenix area, we would love to have you come and worship with us in person any Sunday morning at 9:30 a.m. The Meadows Baptist Church is located at 3701 West Beardsley Road. That's the side road of the 101 just west of 35th Avenue. We would love to have you pop by as we celebrate Jesus together.